Welcome to Brownish Parenting with Dr. Amita on Ruckus Avenue Radio. This show unveils modern Desi parenting topics and explores the latest research on raising our bicultural children. Today, we want to look at South Asian culture and unveiling gender stereotypes and expectations. First, I want to talk a little bit about South Asian culture and how that can influence our ideas about gender. So I want to think about how to have conversations that help us understand how gender plays a role in how we were raised, the things we were told while we were growing up, the things that were expected of us. What types of toys did we play with? What types of careers did we end up pursuing in our lives? And how have we taken on roles in our families as parents today, as mothers and as fathers? And is it based on how we were socialized? Is it based on how we process and understand our own gendered identities? So, South Asian culture typically has these traditional fixed views of what males and females should do. And so we know we're a patriarchal culture where men are more privileged in our society. They are given more status and freedom and leeway in general. So we also have then these fixed expectations that are going to limit women in many ways. So women are not given that freedom. They are seen as being of lower status, right? And they don't have a lot of flexibility. They're often told what to do. Now, men are expected to be those breadwinners, the decision makers, the protectors of the family. And women are typically then confined to being the caregivers, the homemakers, and then obedient wives. And this really limits girls as they're growing up in terms of the education they want to pursue, maybe electives they want to pursue, majors, decision making in their own households, and leadership opportunities in general. Many times, the messages that trickle down to our children are explicit and implicit in many ways. We may say things to girls like, you don't need to work as hard. We may prioritize girls playing with girl toys, like playing with dolls, and boys playing with toys like building Legos. And why does that matter? What types of toys children play with? Well, I want to address this because this leads us to looking at gender stereotypes and maybe what society believes girls should play with and what boys should play with. But what often happens is we don't understand that the toys that they're playing with translate to the skills that they are going to have in their lives, which then translate to the types of careers they're going to pursue because they are maybe better at certain skills than others. So, what does that look like? For example, if a girl is playing with dolls, they most likely are developing their social skills, their language skills, their interpersonal skills. And if boys are playing with more masculine toys, if they're playing with Legos, then you're seeing that they are able to gain, skills in problem solving, visual and spatial skills, and things like that. Now, the research shows us, and this research was done by a retail group, Argos, they looked at how adults who were in roles such as design, like architects, designers, when they were asked what they enjoyed playing with the most, they said building blocks. And that was 60% of adults that said that. And with math related roles like accountants and bankers, when they were asked what did they like to play with, 66% of them said they preferred puzzles. So based on a lot of the research that's currently coming out, I know in California, there was a new law that was recently passed so that major retailers are now required to have gender neutral aisles. When you think about those toy aisles, and so children can just go and find whatever toy appeals to them and they don't have to go down the girl aisle or the boy aisle when looking. Now, we just talked about how women are going to be limited in many ways when we think about the South Asian American culture and the gender stereotypes that do exist. I also want to address how men are also missing out on a whole host of skills. We had an episode on toxic masculinity on brownish parenting, and that revealed that many men end up focusing on their academics and their careers because of that focus in their families. And so they aren't really exposed to a lot of the other topics. And so when it comes to handling conflict, talking about their emotions, they typically don't know how to do that very well. They also don't have a host of other life skills like doing the laundry, preparing their own meals. So, in addition to not having those types of skills, I also want to address some of the unintended consequences when we think about parents treating their children differently. And this has to do with the different ways parents may treat their sons versus their daughters. And this can actually influence the quality of the sibling relationship that the children have with one another. And I think this is really important because I have a brother myself and was treated differently. Today, I have my own children, a son and a daughter. And so I think this is very, very insightful to talk about and to think about because Nadia Shah, who's a clinical social worker in Orange County, actually looks at this topic in a lot of detail and looks at how gender bias can put stress on a sibling connection. And so she states that in our culture, the bias is typically in favor of the son rather than the daughter. And so naturally, when daughters see this, they may become jealous or resentful towards their brothers, and this creates this barrier between the siblings. Now, Nadia also notes that this is kind of similar to that concept of white privilege. And so South Asian sons don't even realize that maybe they're being privileged. And if they do, they're not going to disagree with the advantages of it. Life is good for them. You know, they're getting to do a lot more than their sisters are. So they don't really look at their sisters and say, oh, that sucks that you can't do as much as I can, because they're just like living their lives. And so even if they, again, acknowledge it, they're probably not going to feel sorry or apologize for their parents treating them differently. So in the end, it's really be really up to parents to nurture those relationships and to be aware if there are double standards that exist because of the ways in which we were raised and the expectations that may be placed upon daughters and sons versus based on the South Asian culture. And so we want to try to think about new ways of approaching our children. And so we want to think about how both genders can share in household responsibilities equally, whether it's doing the dishes or mowing the lawn or the types of toys that they're playing with. All of these things really do matter. And so we are going to pause for a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk to our guest, Dr. K, a licensed clinical psychologist, a little bit more about gender socialization and gendered expectations. Welcome back. Today we're talking to Dr. Shanta N. Kanukollu, aka Dr. K. She is a licensed clinical psychologist and has over a decade of clinical experience working with clients of diverse backgrounds in the forensic and medical setting. She has also taught courses related to diversity and gender at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology and Northwestern University. Shanta was a recipient of the Minority Fellowship Award during her graduate career at the University of Michigan, where she obtained her doctorate in clinical psychology and women's studies. She currently has her own private practice in downtown Chicago, where she provides psychotherapy to adults from diverse backgrounds with a focus on South Asian clients. Shanta provides education and outreach regarding mental health outcomes in ethnic minority communities through her writing and professional speaking engagements across the country. She is also the co-founder of Connect to Therapists, which is a service that connects people to the right therapist based on their specific needs and preferences. This service is close to Dr. K's heart because she believes that everyone deserves culturally appropriate and evidence-based mental health care. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. K, for being here to help guide us through this conversation. And before we get into gender and gender expectations and stereotypes, I wanted to just have you tell us a little bit more about your own life and maybe the types of messages you received while growing up about gender.
Thank you so much for having me. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. And I'm just so excited that places like this and spaces like this exist. This
Yeah.
was not the case, even a decade ago when um I was in the field. I was graduated 2010,
Hmm.
and still there wasn't a whole lot
Yeah.
back then. So I'm so grateful for places, podcasts, conversations like this.
Yeah.
So a little bit about me. I grew up in a predominantly South Asian community. I'm from
Hmm.
Edison, New Jersey, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
very well known for being highly,
Yes.
a lot of big South Asian population there. And I loved it because I've learned so much about our culture and our
Hmm.
people, and have a sense of community, and really feel like I was immersed in Indian culture, despite being in America.
Yeah. In the US. Yeah.
Yes. I think the hardships, right, is that also I witnessed a lot of silence about a lot of topics,
Hmm.
a lot of shame, and a lot of confusion about how to tackle certain types of conversations.
Yeah.
And so the message was often to, implicitly or explicitly to like keep quiet about things or to
Hmm.
not focus too much on those things. And gender wise, right? I just what was modeled around me in the community was oftentimes a very gendered
Yeah.
dynamic, right? In a very
Yes.
stereotypical way. Sure, we had people that we were always encouraged to go into our academic pursuits and to go to school and to be the best that we could be. I think there was always an opportunity for education.
Yeah.
But I think there were these messages right around like
Hmm.
who cooks and who parents and who's expected to maybe make shifts in their careers
Yeah.
when you have a family, or how do you dress? What do you look
Yeah.
like? What is feminine? What is not feminine? What is beautiful and what is not? I think there were
Yeah.
very specific messages, even if they weren't
Yeah.
sometimes intentionally
Hmm.
provided. It was just there, right? I was living and
Yeah.
breathing it. So the messages I got, I mean, I think I was also, what's unique is I was raised in a
Hmm.
very specific religious community. And in that community, boys and girls were expected to also not mingle too much,
Hmm.
for women to be dressing modestly, with a specific, way to wear the sari or to wear your salwar kameez so that you're, dressing according to a certain way. So I
Yeah.
think that also shaped some of how I
Uh-huh.
understood gender.
Yeah. And did you have any siblings that you could compare your experiences with?
Yeah, so I have a younger sister.
Okay.
So we didn't have the male-female dynamic,
Uh-huh. Okay.
per se, but I have a younger sister, and I think it was helpful to be able to talk about it and reflect on things with her. She's 5.5 years younger than me. And so we had this birth order dynamic as
Yeah.
well that was
That
happening, but we were able to witness things together.
yeah. And then what was there anything that happened in your life that got you to your career today and your focus on gender?
Um, you know, I followed a traditional path at first.
Yeah.
I thought that I wanted to be a medical doctor. And
Hmm.
I went to school very close to home. I went to Rutgers University for undergrad. And so I went with a large number of people from my high school and from my community all went to Rutgers. And so I thought, I liked the sciences, I liked human behavior. And so I thought medical school is the way to go, pre-med rather.
Hmm.
And I found myself just not really thriving,
Yeah.
not flourishing when I
Hmm.
was in those classes. I
Yeah.
just, something in me just wasn't energized the way I saw a lot of my counterparts being energized,
Yeah.
and being motivated and excited and competitive. And I just wasn't feeling that.
Yeah.
But I took a couple of psychology courses and I felt like a whole new world opened up for me. I mean, it
Yeah.
was truly like an aha moment, like split the skies, songs coming up, right? I was
Yeah.
like, I love this. I love this so much. And I took I think it was called Gender and Health class, and it was a
Hmm.
really general class about health disparities, gender disparities.
Yeah.
And I loved it. It was talked
Yeah.
about gender across the globe and how it's performed, how it's constructed. And that led me then, when I applied to graduate school, I found a program which was wonderful at the University of Michigan,
Uh-huh.
which was a dual degree, dual doctorate program in
Okay.
clinical psychology and women's studies.
Uh-huh.
And so that was my like happy place. Because I also did notice, I will say, there were a lot of experiences I witnessed
Yeah.
of gender violence in the South Asian community,
Yeah.
child sexual abuse, domestic violence, and so I certainly noticed the ways in which power
Yes.
played its way in the community.
Hmm.
And the more I talked about wanting to research this topic, the more I made some aunties and uncles very uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah.
But the more I had people on the side coming and telling me how it had happened to them as well,
Yes. Yeah.
specifically child sexual abuse.
Wow.
And so there was this split
Hmm.
experience. People were like, ugh, uncomfortable. We also not talk to her anymore at these
Hmm.
families. But then on the side, like, oh my gosh, Don't tell
Wow.
anyone but dot, dot, dot. Don't tell anyone but dot, 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 right?
Yeah.
And so I think the more I gather these experiences educationally and then personally too, and
Yeah.
anecdotally, I felt like this had to be something that needed to be talked about in the field. And so that's where my dissertation, a lot of my work has been
Yeah.
around sexual abuse in the South Asian community.
Oh, wow. All right. We're
Mhm.
going to take a break because when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about gender and the South Asian American culture. Welcome back to Brownish Parenting with Dr. Amita. We are now going to take a look at um, what it looks like when we think about the South Asian American culture and what it means to be masculine, what it means to be feminine, why our culture is so tied to these concepts. If Dr. K, if you can just elaborate on that and what you've seen.
Yeah, I think it's really complex because what I've noticed is different parts of India also hold, discuss, perform gender in different ways,
Yeah,
right? We know there's the Hijra community in India, right?
yeah, yeah.
That is, it used to play a very small role in movies, or you saw it somewhere in
Hmm.
pop culture. Um, I saw Monkey Man recently, by the way,
Oh,
with
I haven't seen
Dave
that yet.
Patel, and there's a huge
Oh,
piece of that. So, I
hmm.
mean, gender has been
Yeah.
fluid, and there's been a male gender binary, but there's
Hmm.
also been space in Indian culture to talk about those who don't fall into that binary, which is
Yes.
fascinating, right? We also have, um, Shiva and Shakti in the
Hmm.
Hinduism, right? With Shiva being the masculine energy and Shakti being the feminine,
Yeah.
and a lot of pictures and depictions and idols with both combined. So there's this
Mm.
beautiful way in which I think that the South Asian culture does hold
Yeah.
both
Uh-huh.
as important. And if you think about even the goddesses that
Yes.
are honored in South Asian culture, in Hinduism specifically, um, it's amazing, right? There's a whole
Yeah.
plethora of goddesses,
I
all for
know.
different purposes, and
Yeah. Because I'm
right?
Bengali, so Durga is a really big part of
Yes,
our lives. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But interestingly, the way it's performed, though,
Yeah.
right, in South Asian American culture can be, and I don't want to make this a generalization. I
Hmm.
really worry about sometimes
Yeah.
generalizations being made about our community.
Yeah.
But there is a dynamic where whether how we dress, what um, career areas we pursue,
Hmm.
when we get married, who we get married to, there is sort of some gendered expectations around that,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
I think, why is it there? I mean, I think it's what's been modeled to us. It's what's familiar to us. It's
Yeah.
what feels maybe safe to many of us.
Hmm.
And following the rules are sometimes what we're good at doing
Yeah.
to stay safe and to stay stable and
Yeah.
to also create harmony within our families.
Hmm.
And so I think it also has benefits in terms of like how labor is divided in the home,
I was just thinking about that. Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like if we
Uh-huh.
have rules, it makes things cleaner. It makes
Yeah.
things more predictable and
Hmm.
secure.
Yeah.
And shaking that up can be uncomfortable, messy, risky, right? And so,
Yes. Especially in like collectivistic households where, we know we all want to live together, we all want to be together. So it's hard to
hmm
like focus on that individual and what they really want to do.
hmm right. And so I think following certain paths just makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me why it happens until it doesn't.
Yeah.
It works until it doesn't. I
Mhm.
often say to patients, you know, it's not a problem until it is. Like if you're happy with a certain way of life, awesome. But we
Yeah.
do have to pay attention to when it's no longer working and we're just trying to force it to work for
Yeah.
ourselves or for our children, right?
Yeah. We think about these sort of stereotypes that exist and how that translates to our day-to-day lives. Are there things that you see that are coming up for South Asian males, South Asian females in your practice when based on
hmm
some of these expectations that are placed on them? Like when does it not work, right?
hmm Yeah, I mean, I see mostly individuals who are in their 20s or 30s or 40s in my practice.
Yeah.
They're mostly, I would say, majority of my practice is South Asian American.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed is there is guilt and shame when when individuals feel that they're not doing what their families expected them to do.
Yeah.
And that looks different, perhaps, by gender.
Hmm.
We're talking about gender in this binary again, right? So I have females who are really frustrated with themselves that they're not married yet, or that
Uh-huh.
they're not able to find a partner who would be accepted by their families.
Yeah.
But they're trying, they're on all the apps, but it's not working. And there's this, sure, biological clock that's there, that's
Hmm.
present for them. But
Yeah.
there's also this awareness that, like, how come other people my age in my community who are also female are already getting married? Like, I feel stuck that my cousin who I grew up with who's my age, they're married. How come I'm not?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think there's pressure around marriage and then and dating.
And especially
Um,
when you go to some of these parties and gatherings, and that's the first question you get asked, or
mhm,
and you're having to deal
mhm,
with that and that
mhm,
expectation that's just there and being stated
mhm,
out loud. Yeah.
mhm. And then the same will go with then, when you're having your
Yeah.
first kid, why aren't you having kids yet? Or
Yeah.
then if you have a kid, where's your second kid? It's again, I think people are not always doing it with malintent, but it is
Hmm.
really tiring to feel
Yeah.
like you have to perform in this way with that regard too for, things like, hello, infertility, or
Yeah.
maybe the person has just had a loss, or
Hmm.
maybe someone is not actually sure if they want to be with in a heterosexual partnership. Like, these
Yeah.
are things that are just not even like thought of, right? And
I
so the
know.
expectation then is it has to be this way. And if it's not this way, hey, you're upsetting me. You're making me feel I'm
Yeah.
injured that you're not performing the way I think you should be performing,
Wow.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then for males, I think too, there's this expectation, right, around like having a lucrative job, being married as well at a
Yeah.
certain point. Why aren't you married? Um, and then are you also near your parents? Their parents are aging. Are you caring for
Yeah.
them? Are you close enough to them? Why don't you live close to them now because they need you? I
Yeah.
think both, men and women experience this. But I've seen that there are some gendered expectations around that too.
Yeah, that is so tough when you think about all of those like individual complex nuanced characteristics you just talked about, to have to battle these expectations, and then also just think about, are you good enough as a son or a daughter, and constantly thinking about that and putting guilt on yourself for not meeting those expectations because they constantly keep shifting and evolving.
Mhm.
Are there things that you, I guess, help South Asian adults kind of think through when they are probably going through this, like, I'm not good
Mhm.
enough as a son or a
Mhm.
daughter?
Yeah, I think giving space for them to
Hmm.
talk about that
Yeah.
and sort of grieve that they thought their life might have been in a certain way and it's not, right?
Yeah.
That's been important. But also highlighting and reflecting back to my clients in the room that often they're basing their sense of goodness
Uh-huh.
off of what their families expected, not based on what they actually want.
Yeah.
Right. And so while they feel like they're disappointing people, or they feel guilty for not being close enough to their parents, or ashamed for not spending more time with them, or whatever might be the case, can we also honor, right, that those expectations are based on their family's stuff
Yeah.
and that we have our own desires, hopes, dreams, needs, and
Yeah.
that it's okay to honor both,
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
right?
Because so many
Holding
times
both.
so many times we're just focused on the external. We haven't even really thinking through growing up as a South Asian. You're not given a chance to think about what you need, what you want, what your opinions are, all
Hmm.
the things you just stated. Yeah.
And people will say, "Oh, I feel selfish for thinking that way. Like that's so American, that's so
Yeah.
white.
Hmm.
I think that way." And so I'll offer it in a different way. It's not about saying your needs are first, prioritize yourself, screw them, put a boundary up, right?
Hmm.
It can be, how about we hold compassion for both?
For both. Yes.
So, yes, mom and dad, I hear that you want me to have a child.
Yeah.
And I would like you to honor my partnership with my husband
Hmm.
to decide when we would like to have a child. because it's very important for us to be absolutely on the same page and ready if we want to have a
Yeah.
child.
Yeah.
So I hear you, and I'm going to honor my needs because it's imperative that we do that. That
Yeah.
we're not forced into
Hmm.
resentful marriages, resentful
Hmm.
like moments of being parents, right? Like we're just thrown into it because of the should statements.
Yeah.
Then we're not really doing anything in a fully present way, in a fully thought out way, in a fully authentic way. And that shows up eventually.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Just being able to voice that, right? Both sides and really bring it, yeah, bring it to fruition. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about what parents can do to help address the ways in which they're socializing their children today. Welcome back to Brownish Parenting with Dr. Amita. We are now going to take a look at some tips that we can have for parents who are trying to maybe do things a little differently when they are thinking about raising their children. And I'd love to start with the younger age group and what to keep in mind when we don't want to project our own expectations onto our children about gender.
Mhm.
So, Dr. K, what do you think about just as you're having children, like, um, thinking about baby registries or having
Mhm.
infants and toddlers?
Yeah, I think self-awareness and introspection is key,
Yeah,
right? Asking, no one had certainly had told me to think about this, but I wish there was a guidebook on this. There isn't, right? You figure it out as you go.
yeah,
But I think it's important to consider what type of household do you want? What type of environment do you want to create for your children?
yeah.
Right? We can say, oh, I'm going to make sure they can do whatever they want in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
You actually ensuring that they are then exposed to different types of toys, people, educational methods,
Yeah.
books would have a
Mhm.
diverse array of colors and faces and hair and
Yeah.
genders, right?
Uh-huh.
Because I think that many times we have ideals of how we want it to look.
Yeah.
We haven't been given the tools on sort of what types of building blocks we need to get there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if you're wanting a home that is really encouraging children to be whoever they want to be, gender wise, gender expression wise, sexuality wise, career wise, right?
Yeah.
We want to pay attention to how we're talking to them,
Mm-hmm.
saying to them, how we're
Yeah.
complimenting them. And people have said, oh, people are getting so sensitive these days. We can't say anything, right?
Yeah.
No, it's because we're trying to correct for something that has been problematic. And so it's okay if we have to be uncomfortable ourselves.
Yeah.
Learn a new way of talking to kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you're bad or you're dumb or if you're too old school.
Yeah.
We have to be evolving, all of us at all times, right? And
Yeah.
so I think, how are we talking to our kids? What opportunities are you open to giving them, boys and girls?
Yeah.
You know, is it gendered? What types of classes you're putting them into? Can, boys and girls be put into jujitsu classes, karate classes, dance
Yeah.
classes, cooking classes, right?
Yeah.
Um, the toys that we buy, are we only buying pink for girls and blue for boys? Or are we switching it up and allowing
Yeah.
it all to happen and let kids be drawn to what they're drawn to?
Absolutely. And I think it's like, you think through like when they find out if they're having like a boy or a girl, and then they maybe project their own beliefs of what they want that boy to do or that girl to do. And so you see that sometimes just in how, like I was saying, like with the registries and like a sports room or a princess room and
Mhm.
putting them in dance classes. So maybe also thinking through, right? Like your own expectations and where those are coming from when you think about the gender.
And I
Yeah.
will say the universe like laughed at me real hard because my
Uh,
registry for my first child, my daughter, was all the items were yellow and gray.
yeah.
Yellow, gray, and white, like
Uh,
onesies, hats, shoes, dresses, whatever, like pants that were all gray and white
mm,
or green and blue. Her nursery was elephant themed with yellow and gray and white.
yeah.
The girl for 2 years was obsessed with dresses and Barbies. And,
I've
right?
heard this from parents when they try really hard and then their child is really into the gender and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I'm also it's humbling to be like, I will do my best to offer what I can and be aware of
Uh-huh.
what I can.
Yeah.
But if there is a natural desire
Hmm.
to, have a propensity or an inclination to go in a certain way, so be it.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure whatever I'm putting out
Putting out
there is
there.
not
Yeah.
forcing them to think that's what they have to like. And I'm sure I still did it in my own way, in different
Yeah.
ways.
Well, and the
Right.
media, right? So it's also
Yes.
whatever they're being exposed to, Disney and all
Yes.
of, yeah. Yeah.
And of course, like Elsa was a huge thing for a
Yes.
while from
Yeah.
Frozen, right? Like
Yeah.
that's just
How it
um
is. Yeah.
but it goes it changes too. Now she
Yeah.
won't wear skirts ever. She'll only loves pants. And so just kind of just being mindful of also not being injured or insulted or shocked or angry if they're not going in a way that we expect. Like even for me, right? Not being like,
Yeah.
what the heck? I just gave you all these gender, but kind of allowing ourselves to be fluid with wherever our children are at and meeting
Uh,
them where they're at, I think is important.
yeah, that kind of leads me to my next question because I was going to ask you about as children get older, we know that their gendered beliefs can intensify because of hormones and things like that. So, what about kids that maybe don't identify with their gender, and how
Mhm.
can parents support them? And then also just thinking through an early age, like the messages that parents, right, give their children. And then sometimes children feel like they can't speak out because they know their parents really want them to be, identifying with a certain gender.
Mhm.
Are there tips for parents so that they can create a safe space for them when they don't identify with the gender?
Mhm. First, I will say,
Mm,
please never ever call it a phase or a fad.
yeah. Hmm.
That is something I've heard, and it really
So
hurts.
common for South Asian parents
Just
because
a
it's,
phase.
yeah.
It's just a thing. It'll pass. You
Hmm.
don't know it. You don't know the experience of your child, so don't assume that. That is really
Yeah.
unfair to
Yeah.
invalidate their experience, right?
Yeah.
It minimizes what they might be going through.
Hmm.
Mm. I think also be mindful of our own judgments around it. I heard someone say, "Can you believe they're talking about this in kindergarten? My kid's 5. It's so young to talk about it." Why? Like, why is that so
Yeah.
young? We don't talk about it being too young to say someone has curly hair,
Yeah.
someone has different skin color,
Yeah.
right? Or someone,
Mhm.
might have a disability. We should probably like accommodate. Like, why can't we notice that we have diversity in a
Yeah.
space? That kids by 5 and 6 have thought about gender. They
Mhm.
have thoughts on gender,
Yeah.
right? And so noticing, our language is first. It's a
Yeah.
fade, bad, or it's too young. And noticing when our judgments based on our own histories
Hmm.
are coming up, right, is really important, I would say, first and foremost, because the moment that happens, the child who's hearing that is not going to want to tell you more
Yes.
or ask
They
more
shut down
questions.
right away. Yeah.
Or be
Yeah.
curious. Because
Hmm.
even if they're not identifying as that, or they're not maybe resonating with what you're talking about, their sibling might, their friend
Hmm.
might.
Yeah.
And we want to, right? I mean, our hope is we want to, develop and raise kids who are kind and good. And
Yeah.
so if we want to even increase sensitivity on their part towards others,
Yeah.
we should be mindful of not minimizing it and poo-pooing it and saying it's just a thing that's like sexy or something in this era. And then just meeting children where they're at,
Hmm.
asking them more questions, being curious, asking them which pronouns they prefer, how they like to dress.
Yeah.
And even if you have no idea how to go about it, right? Being curious and being open will be key, and that'll go a long way.
Yeah. It's like telling them you're on their side, like teach me, what I don't know, right? So
Mhm.
being open to learning about it
Mhm.
versus again, just kind of shutting down the conversation or trying to change their mind or any of that. That
Mhm. Yeah.
happens a lot. Let's go ahead and take a break.
Sure.
And when we come back, we will talk a little bit more about how to address gender with the South Asian community. Welcome back to Brownish Parenting with Dr. Amita. I now wanted to take a look at parents and parenting, that division of household roles. Like once you get married, like how do we divide and conquer? Sometimes those gender stereotypes play a role when we say work to your strengths. And
Mhm.
obviously, for women, that would mean caregiving and household duties. But if
Mhm.
we're trying to change those fixed gender roles, How can we start to do that, especially since I'm thinking about me and my husband? We both grew up in very traditional households, right? It was very
Mhm.
fixed set of roles. My mom was always doing all of that, what we just said, the housekeeping, caregiving. My dad was working, same with his parents. Now we want to actually consciously create role models for our kids where
Mhm.
we are trying to do, both of those things, and our kids see that. But some of us are naturally better at certain things, like with multitasking and household chores than others.
Mhm.
There may not be as much motivation from, husbands to want to do some of the other things that are these tasks that are not so fun, like folding laundry.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, what are, I guess, how do we take these steps?
Yeah, I've seen people really, really trying to be egalitarian
Yeah.
at home for their
Hmm.
kids. And that might be just sort of where I live in Chicago and people
Yeah.
coming in for therapy who live in the city. Whatever might be the case, the sample that I've seen is people are really trying to create egalitarian homes in terms of labor and maintaining lists, right?
Yeah.
I think there is still such hardship when it comes to the mental load that women often carry,
Yeah.
right? Like you said, maybe because it's naturally, it's where women are better at certain things, or maybe because we've been socialized to think in certain ways, or we prioritize certain things like who's getting which gift at the birthday party. Did we get the
Mm,
birthday card for them? Oh my
yeah.
gosh, I pay the school's like fee on time, right? I think some of it might be like naturally what we're good at. Some of it's what we're
Yeah.
taught to do, what we like naturally are passionate about or care more
Yeah.
about,
Uh,
right? So perhaps I might care a little bit more about like what type of gift I get for my daughter's 8-year-old friend. Like, is it a cool gift? Is she into it? Is it like a
yeah.
generic gift? Like, I might think a little more about it. Um, but I think what's hard is when that's not acknowledged,
Yeah.
right? When, a female will say, wait a minute, we've been equal partners. And when we had a kid, when we had a kid,
Hmm.
I naturally had to be home for maternity leave to nurse, heal, and all of that. But wait a minute, did you notice that my career took a halt
Yeah.
and yours didn't? Or wait, did you notice that like I've been up nursing and so I'm exhausted and missing out on work emails?
Yeah.
Whereas you're not. Wait, did you notice that? Because this kind of
Yeah.
sucks,
Yes. Yes.
right? Or hey, like that's so cool. You got a promotion, but now we had our first kid and now we're planning our second. I'm just
Hmm.
going to take a hit and not become partner now. Wait a minute,
Yeah.
right? Or how
Yeah.
come that guy got promoted and I didn't? And then people are like, oh, it's because you took time off. Like, right, to keep our species going, right? And to have,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or like,
There's
hey,
a
all the men in this room, how come all of you in leadership, all your wives are at home
yeah,
and I'm the only woman in this table? Wait a minute. Hold on, right? Like, why aren't
totally.
women here with me, right?
Yeah.
So I think acknowledging that is important because when you
Yeah.
have the privileges of not noticing it and not talking about it, that shows
Mhm.
up in
Yeah.
that shows up in who's going on work trips, who's staying late at work,
Hmm.
who is a person we call when we're feeling sick in the middle of the
Yeah.
night,
Yeah.
right? And so I think how to combat that, I think
Hmm.
it's for couples to have these conversations and for each side to be heard and
Yeah.
validated, right? That
Hmm.
sure, biology is a big part of it, but the reality is that there's some uneven things that happen then because of that.
Yeah, because otherwise, yeah, so much resentment can build up, and that
Mhm.
translates into a lot of things that happen day to day,
Mhm.
with couples, with families, and so
Mhm.
I think if just even having your kids see that these conversations
Mhm.
are happening, and they are difficult conversations and sensitive,
Mhm.
but it's so important to have those conversations.
And
Um,
I will say,
yeah,
I've also done the uncomfortable thing of calling out people when they say, "Oh my gosh, is your husband's alone with the girls?
yeah,
Oh my gosh, does he have help?" Right? But no one asks me, "Do I have
yeah,
help?" And
no,
no
yeah, yeah,
one asks me. So I've had people of the previous generation say, "Oh, poor guy, he's all alone with the kids." Oh,
uh,
you're going to be out of town? But never, never asked me that when I was alone with the kids multiple times.
Yeah.
And so I think
Yeah.
it's important for my kids to also hear that,
Yeah.
for me to say like, hey guys,
The grown adult.
I've been
Yes.
alone too, and
Yes.
we each love our kids, and we
Uh-huh.
each have a relationship with the kids, and it's important for us to have bonding time with mom or dad.
Yeah.
We love that in our family. And just say, you can say it in a nice way like that, right?
Uh-huh.
Or, I mean, I've sometimes been like, hey, you never asked me that question. What's that about?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's good. Yeah. I'm always like, yeah, I'm glad times are changing. Especially with aunties, I'm just like, oh, can you imagine like when, you just had to live with your in-laws and do all the household tasks? Or do you remember when there was a period of time when women were on their periods and they couldn't leave their house? They couldn't go anywhere. Can you believe that? I'm so glad times are changing today, and just getting them to like start thinking about how their lives are so much better because times are changing and they're going to continue changing and moving forward. So
And what's
yeah,
good is there's
yeah,
still a pocket of people I
yeah.
know that I've met, that I've heard of.
Uh-huh.
There are a pocket of people who still believe it should be that way,
Wow.
right? Like I know someone
Yeah.
who's like my age who wasn't allowed to do things at a puja because she was on her period.
And they still think like we should be doing that. That we
And they're like,
shouldn't
well, I
be.
gotta respect my parents. I'll just follow. I'll just do that. It's fine.
Yeah.
Right. And so again, if it's a problem for you, I hope you're able to build a strength and advocate for yourself. If it's not a problem for you, okay, so be it. But I
Yeah.
think we have to pay attention to what messages we're giving the next generation then about their bodies and about their value, right? I know
Yeah.
someone who wasn't allowed to do something in a puja because she had had a miscarriage.
Oh, yeah. That's so
I mean,
sad.
that's a way of telling somebody like they did something
Yeah.
wrong, or they have to be
Yeah.
excluded,
Yeah.
or that they're broken, or they're, like bad luck,
Mm.
that maybe they just have bad luck, but that's awful because they didn't do anything to deserve
No.
it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it persists. If you
Hmm.
look closely at certain communities and homes, it still persists. So I think things have moved along so much in many ways. And then
Yeah.
there's some people who just don't want to, shake the boat, let's rock the boat too much and keep it going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and take a break. Welcome back to Brownish Parenting with Dr. Amita on Ruckus Avenue Radio. We are at the end here, and I just wanted to ask Dr. K if there's any other current issues influencing South Asian individuals or families that she wanted to address with the Brownish parenting community.
No particular issues come to mind. I just encourage people to please stay curious,
Yeah.
please stay inquisitive,
Hmm.
uh, lean into the discomfort if there's something you haven't talked to your kids about, like good touch and bad touch, safe touch, and
Hmm.
unsafe touch, right? Like
Yeah.
just, and please know, South Asian parents, this happens to South Asian individuals with people in their community.
Yeah.
In the Asian American community, perpetrators are more likely to be people that we know,
Hmm.
family, friends, cousins, whatever, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
please don't be shy in talking about it or in asking for help if you don't know how to talk about it, because it affects boys and girls
Yeah.
and can have a lot of consequences.
And believing your children when they tell you as well, right?
Please,
Yes.
and tell them what were they wearing or why were
Yes.
you there the hour. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Someone can be naked walking by you. You should still
Yeah.
have the, wherewithal to know that you're not allowed to touch someone's body without consent.
Yes. Yes. And yeah, they're difficult conversations to have, but they're so important to have to even just check in with your child and be like, is there anything you want to tell me? Because sometimes children feel like their parents are too busy to bring something up. It's always about the day-to-day tasks that are happening. And so just having space in your day, because I know a lot in the Bay Area, I know a lot of kids are actually saying that they don't have time to talk to their parents in general, just about things that are happening, like just regular forms that they need to fill out and things like that, because their parents are so busy. So creating that space, so important.
Yes, slow down. It's important.
Yeah. And I want to thank you, Dr. K, for being here and talking to us about so much. We've learned so much from you. And if listeners want to find and connect with you, where can they find you?
Yes, please. I'd love to hear from you. My website is snktherapy.com. That's
Mhm.
S as in Sam, as in Nancy, K, snktherapy.com. And then my Instagram account is snk_therapy. I have some content there that I hope people um, will be curious about and want to dig deeper on. I specifically have just I'm starting rather in the
Hmm.
fall, a thriving mindset group for women
Oh,
who are wanting to shift their mindsets
oh,
in regards to maybe careers, parenting, moving, aging parents, whatever it might be.
yeah.
I found, I did a TED talk recently, a TEDx talk recently on surviving to thriving in the South Asian community.
Oh, nice.
And from there,
Yeah.
I found that so many people said they resonated with this idea that we've been taught to stay safe and stable and successful.
So true. Yeah.
What about like beyond that, like
Yeah.
fulfillment, joy,
Uh-huh.
nourishment?
Yeah.
So, inspired, by the conversations from this TEDx talk, I'm starting a group for 10 women to come together and support each other. So, if you're interested in that, find information on my Instagram page.
Okay.
Either way, I would love to
Yeah.
hear from folks and hear what their needs and impressions are.
Awesome. Yes, I love your Instagram page. So I encourage everyone to go on there and look at that content. It's wonderful. I've learned so much from you. So thank you for being here and have a great day. Yeah.
You too. Take care.
Okay.